to dirty lives. Dusty Bibles lead to dirty lives. You show me a dusty Bible, and I'll show you a dirty life. Paul, writing to his young son in the faith, Timothy, wrote in 2 Timothy chapter 2, around verse 15. He told Timothy to study, not scan, not browse, but to study. You do know that Paul was a tent maker. So he uses tent making language to describe how we are to study. We're not to scan, we're not to browse, but we are to study. And rightly dividing the word of truth, literally translated, you have to be willing to lay it out right and cut it out straight. Lay it out right, then cut it out straight. That's what I plan to do tonight. I plan to be right. I plan to be straight with you in regard to our exegetical look at the book of Proverbs. We have tagged our study, A Pilgrimage Through Proverbs. A pilgrimage through Proverbs. It's my task tonight to share with you the truth of the scriptures found here in the book of Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. As we study the words and the wording of Proverbs 12, let's do what Paul recommended. Let's do what Paul recommended. Paul recommended to the church at Corinth in 2 Corinthians 13, around verse 5. He says, examine your own selves. Oftentimes when we go to the Bible, we are looking at other people, and in our looking at other people, what we do is the word that we hear is for other people and not for ourselves, and we fail to examine ourselves. Tonight, we need to do an autopsy. Autopsy. Why an autopsy? Well, an autopsy, when you break the word down, auto means self, optics, so it's auto optics. When you do an autopsy, you're doing auto optics. Auto means self, optics means to see. Tonight, we want to be able to see for ourselves what Solomon is saying to us in these last and evil days. Beloved, before we officially begin our study of chapter 12, tonight I want you to be on the lookout. Bola, be on the lookout for Solomon's favorite word. Solomon's favorite word. What's Solomon's favorite word? Solomon's favorite word is the contrasting conjunction but. Throughout chapter 12, he uses but excessively throughout chapter 12. By using the contrasting conjunction but, it lets us know that Solomon's focus is on contrast and comparison. Contrast and comparison. He's contrasting and comparing the unrighteous with the righteous, the unwise to the wise, the godly with the ungodly. So throughout chapter 12, look out for Solomon's focus of contrasting good with evil, godly with ungodly, righteous with unrighteous, and wise with those who are otherwise or unwise. Please remember that the word but is a contrasting conjunction, meaning it contrasts what has been said with what is about to be said. So Solomon's focus in chapter 12 is contrast and comparison. Contrast and comparison. He'll be contrasting and comparing the godly with those who are ungodly. Those who are ungodly. Here we go. Chapter 12. We'll commence our study at verse 17. I believe we stopped at verse 16, so we'll pick up immediately at verse number 17. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 17, the Bible says, "He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness is deceitful. He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness is deceitful." Solomon parades before us several people. He parades before us now several people who are what I call wordy. They're wordy. They talk too much. They are excessive in their verbalization. And Solomon says that there is peril in talking too much. There's peril in talking too much. So as we look at chapter 12, 17 to around, I believe, verse 22, he's going to be talking about words. People who speak different kinds of words. Now, in verse 17, write this down, beloved, it's important. Because if you miss this, you'll miss the whole gist of chapter 12, 17 through 22. If you miss this. Now, in verse 17, he parades before us a man who speaks, here it is, perverted words. Verse 17 is about a man who speaks perverted words. Verse 17 is all about a man who speaks perverted words. Verse 18, Solomon parades before us a man who is willing to speak piercing words. In verse 18, he parades before us a man who speaks piercing words. In verse 19, he parades before us a man who speaks permanent words. Verse 20 through 21 talks about a man who speaks profound words. And then we will look at a man who speaks perverted words, a man who will speak piercing words, a man who speaks permanent words, and close with a man who speaks profound words. Now let's begin our study officially. In verse number 17, he parades before us a man who speaks perverted words. Verse 17, he that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness is deceitful. We must hear Solomon, because Solomon has much to say about the tongue. Solomon here has much to say about the tongue, especially an abusive tongue and an abrasive tongue, if you will. Solomon suggests that there are special perils, there are special dangers lie in wait for those who are wordy, that talks too much. So here, Solomon parades before us wordy men. For the person who who talks too much. It is an evil. Solomon suggests that it's evil when we find ourselves talking excessively. I chose the word perverted here for verse 17, all because the word perverted literally means one who is corrupt morally. One who is corrupt morally. A person that is depraved, a person who is deviant. That word deviant means one who is willing to change, for one's advantage. Here is a person literally that is willing to change a lie into the truth so that they can have the advantage. One who is willing to modify the truth to make it a lie, if you will. One who is willing to alter the truth so they can have the advantage. That's what a perverted person is. A perverted person does something corrupt so they can have the advantage. So they can have the advantage to take advantage. Are you listening? Are you listening? If this is a person who's willing to give themselves the advantage in order to take advantage of someone else, to take advantage of someone else. Here, according to verse 17, Solomon again expresses the pervert who speaks perverted words, that speaks perverted word. He who speaks truth declares righteousness. In other words, a wise man's words are filled with truth. A righteous man's words are filled with truth. A godly man's his words are filled with truth. Someone who wants to be right and true speaks the truth. But here, look at verse 17 now. He says, the righteous man showeth forth righteousness. But there's that word. There's Solomon's favorite word, the amazing word, but. Now we know the sentence was flowing in one direction, but when we see the word but, we know it's about to flow in a different and opposite direction, He says, but in verse 17, a false witness is deceitful. A false witness is deceitful. And here, a deceitful person is a person who wants to sell you a bag of goods, is a person who wants to present a lie as the truth. This is the person that wants to present a lie and wants you and I to accept it as if it's the truth. Now, the Bible is clear that God detests lies. God detests lies, and he detests liars. Yeah, let's be clear. God detests lies and detests liars, but he delights in those of us who are willing to value the truth, if you will. So here in verse 17, he parades before us the perverted man. And you remember, it falls under the anticlimactic thought of wordy men, a wordy man, if you will. So we first started with a perverted man who speaks perverted words. Now in verse 18, he transitions from talking about perverted words to talk about piercing words. In verse 18, he transitions from verse 17, talking about perverted words, to talk about piercing words. Piercing words, yes. Let's look. Let's read together verse 18, if you will. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. The tongue of the wise is health. Now, what is Solomon saying here? Beloved, I believe Solomon is trying to say to us here in verse 18, there are some who have taken time to perfect the ability to stab people, to slice people into pieces. They have perfected the art of stabbing people in the back and slicing people into pieces. In other words, they have made it their ministry to hurt and to bring harm to other people verbally. Yeah, to do hurt, to do harm to people verbally. They use their tongues as knives, if you will. They attack people verbally by what they say. Another, to bring hurt and harm to another, instead of bringing healing, because that's what a righteous man's words are rich, because they bring healing, not hurt and not harm. So if you are righteous, you want to bring health, you want to bring healing to others through your speech. But if you are unrighteous, unwise, and ungodly, you don't mind slicing people, stabbing people verbally. That's what Solomon is trying to tell us. And I maintain that verbal licks are just as harmful as physical licks. The person who came up with the adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never, that's the biggest lie ever been told. Because sometimes verbal licks hurt more than physical licks, because it reaches in on the inside of us, The tongue of a righteous man produces health, produces healing, but the words of an unrighteous person are hurt and harm others. Let's be clear that if you are righteous, if you are wise, if you are godly, you always want to speak words that produce health and healing. If you are unwise, therefore you are ungodly and unrighteous, you don't mind hurting people verbally. You don't mind sharing verbal licks, if you will. And verbal licks can hurt just as words. But in verse 19, let's read verse 19, if you will. Verse 19 says, the lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. I like this text. I love this text because it says to us that the lips of truth shall be established forever. Established forever. But a lying tongue is only effective for a moment. Only effective for a moment. So in a real sense, truthful lips, listen to me now, truthful lips endure forever. Truthful words are permanent. There it is. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about permanent words. Words that will last. Words that are forever. Permanent words. Permanent words, beloved, they last. Permanent words last. Truthful words last. You see, God looks after those who love the truth. Did you hear what I just said? God makes it his business to look after those who tell the truth, who speak the truth. And under his blessings, beloved, under his blessings, they will endure, they will last. God given permanency, if you will. God gives permanency to those who value the truth, those who value the truth. But, there it is again, Solomon's favorite word, but, contrast and comparison. The lying tongue versus the truthful tongue is but a moment. Teach your lesson, brother pastor. Here it is. Here it is. God establishes the fact, God, I love your word. He establishes the fact that he will see to it that those who value the truth will last. They'll last. They'll last. They'll last because of God's blessings, because of God's protection, because of God's love for the truth and love for the truth teller. God will make sure they endure, they're established, if you will. But the lying tongue, which God detests, he detests a lying tongue. The lying tongue will appear effective only for a moment. Only for a moment, even though you could be lying and telling a lie that lasts for years according to man's calendar. But when you put it next to the everlasting age of eternal God, it's just a moment. It's just a moment. It's just a moment in time. It's just a moment in time, because the way God looks at time, the way God looks at time is time past, time present, time future. That's the way we look at time. But time is endless with God. It's endless with God. What is that Peter said? A day is as 1,000 years to God, and 1,000 years is but a day with God. God is not affected by time. That's why he takes his time to do his business, because time doesn't affect, it affects us, but it doesn't affect him. And I want you to be clear that the lying tongue is for the effectiveness of a lie is but for a moment, just for a moment. The lying tongue on the surface appears to be stronger than the truthful tongue. But that's only for a moment. That's only for a moment. That's only for a moment in time. All because a lie may last for years. A lie may last for years, but it is but a moment in the eyesight of God, in the eyesight of God. And you can rest assured that if you lie or you are a liar, you will be found out, because the truth will come forth in its own due time, in its own due time. It's the truth that will abide. It's the truth that will last. It's the truth that will endure. It will outlast a lie any day of the week, any day of the week, any day of the week. It's the lie, beloved, stay with me now. It's the lie that will perish. It's the lie that will perish, because the truth will abide forever. We started in verse 17 with the perverted words, the piercing word in verse 18, the permanent word in verse 19. That brings us now to verse 20, Deceit is in the heart of them that imagine evil, but to the counselors of peace is joy. Let's read it again. Deceit is in the heart of them that imagine evil, but to the counselors of peace is joy. Now I want you to notice one thing here. I want you to notice one thing. Look at the word counselors. Look at the word counselors. The word counselors, if you notice, is not singular, it's plural. Whenever Solomon, throughout Proverbs, from chapter 1 to chapter 31, Solomon always uses counselors in the plural, meaning more than one counselor, because he establishes the fact early on in Proverbs that there is there is strength. There's strength in having a multiplicity of counselors. It's wise to have more than one counselor. So he groups the counselors together as one by making the word counselors, which is plural. I just want to point that out to you. He's not talking about one counselor. He's talking about a multiplicity, variety, if you will, of counselors, because he's already established the fact that there's power, there's strength. It's wise to have more than one counselor. So when we look at verse 20, now look at verse 21. There shall no evil, God bless your word, there shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. There shall be no evil to happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. These words from verse 20 to 21 are profound words. Here it is. They are profound words. Verses 20 through 21 qualify as profound words. Profound words. Now, when we look at verse 20, it starts off with the word deceit. Deceit. What is deceit, Pastor? What is deceit? Well, deceit, in a real sense, deceit is a Latin word. It's a Latin word. The word deceit comes from a Latin word. It literally means to cheat. The word literally means to cheat, to be a fraud, if you will, to be fraudulent, if you will, both in word and in deed. It's to be fraudulent, it's to be a fraud, it's to cheat, both in word and in deed. It literally means to be dishonest. There it is. It means to be dishonest. Solomon says, those who cheat, those who are fraudulent, those who are dishonest in their words and deeds, those who devise evil, if you will, those that intend to do evil to others. We need to be mindful of the fact that evil here means to withhold, to willfully withhold that which rightly belongs to another. When we're doing evil, we're willfully withholding something that belongs to another, either God or it belongs to man. It either belongs to God or it belongs to man. To willfully withhold, when we hurt other people and do harm to other people, we're doing evil because we're willfully withholding goodwill towards another. So evil, in a real sense, is to willfully withhold that which rightfully belongs to another. It either rightfully belongs to God or it rightfully belongs to another person, This person is corrupt in the eyesight of God. But here it is, there's Solomon's favorite word again. But those who give counsel of peace will experience joy. They'll experience happiness. They'll experience contentment. Those who spread deceit and have in their heart to do evil, to devise evil, they intend to do evil to others, that person is corrupt in the eyesight of God. Don't miss this. But the person, the counselor, the person who's giving advice to others that will produce happiness and contentment and joy, that person will experience the same thing, because the same thing you give out is the same thing you'll get back. It's based upon the principle of sowing and reaping. Whatever you sow, that's what you're going to reap. And matter of fact, if you push me, I'll tell you that not only will you reap what you sow, beloved, you're going to reap more than you sow. You're going to reap more than you sow. So be careful what you sow. Be careful that your heart has no deceit, no motive to devise ill will or hurt or harm to others, because if I have in my heart to do you wrong, then guess what? It won't be long before someone comes right along and do me wrong, worse than I did you, because you always reap more than you sow. Again here, please be mindful of the fact that the word counselor, person who gives advice, is in the plural and not in the singular. And if you want to check me out and make sure that I'm saying what I'm saying is correct, I'll give you some proof text to show you that the word counselor is being used in the plural constantly from chapter 1 to chapters 31. That's Proverbs 11:14. The word counselors is present. Proverbs 15:22 is another example of it being in the plural, and Proverbs 24:6. So what are you saying here, Pastor? You said verses 20 through 21 are profound words. You compared and contrasted the deceitful man with a man who is willing to give good advice rather than deceitful advice. Deceitful advice is full of lies and untruths, but the counselor that gives good advice will promote happiness, contentment, and joy. But the person who traffics deceit will get that in return. That's what Solomon is trying to tell us. Don't envy a deceitful person because they have the advantage at the moment, because that is just for a moment. The deceitful person may look as though they have the advantage, but that's just for a moment, because God blesses those who value the truth, And so the whole gist of verse 20 is God blesses those, here it is, blesses those that value the truth. And God punishes those that devalue the truth. He will punish those who devalue the truth. That's what verse 20 is all about. Now in verse 21, we're still under the thematic thought of profound words, Verse 21 says, there shall no evil happen to the just. That's mighty strong wording here. It's a profound statement. But the wicked shall be filled with mischief. The wicked shall be filled with mischief. What is Solomon saying to us? Unpack that for us, Pastor. I'll be glad to do it. Notice what he says in verse 21, thou shalt know evil. No one will successfully withhold from the just what rightfully belongs to them. That's what the verse is saying. There's no way that can happen for the just. But in verse 21, the B section, has Solomon's favorite word, but. Contrast and comparison, the wicked shall be filled with mischief. The wicked shall be filled with mischief, with mischief. Here we go. Let me say to you, Harvey, what the text is not saying, because oftentimes the Bible uses this as a teaching tool by sharing with us what a thing is not, so it can make clear what a thing is. Yeah, the Bible will take an example of what a thing is not, so we can really see what a thing is. Let me tell you what it's not saying. It's not saying that the just will have no troubles or will not come face to face, eyeball to eyeball with trouble. It's not saying that. It's not saying that just like everybody experiences challenges and trouble and trials and temptations, troubles, tribulation, the just have to go through the same thing with a twist. Watch this now. God, I love your word. With a twist. Watch this. God literally manages what the just has to go through. Yeah, he always manages the depth of trouble, the extent of the trouble. He always manages it so that the trouble that the just have to go through is manageable. Yeah, it's manageable because God is managing the depth of trouble, the extent of your troubles, the time of, teach your lesson, Pastor, the times of your trouble. You serve a God that puts restraints on trouble. It puts restraints on trouble. God always, when his people are in trouble, he always puts a time limit on how much trouble can come in so much time. Yeah, he puts a restraint. Okay, you want an example? Look at Noah. Look at Noah. Noah was in trouble. Noah was in a serious storm. You know, we studied this for several weeks. Noah was in serious trouble, but God restrained the floods and the rain to 40 days. 40 days. I wonder why God didn't allow it to rain 41 days. Well, because God knows just how much we can bear. What kind of God is this that's so concerned about you and me that he will not allow us to undergo more than we can bear? More than we can bear. What a God we serve. He will not let us go a moment over our limits. Now, I know you may think that you've reached your limit, but it's not. God doesn't stop trouble on the basis of what we think our limit is. He knows our limit. He knows just how much we can bear. So God will restrain our troubles. He will restrict our troubles to a certain period of time because he knows just how much we can bear. The Bible says in verse 21, there shall no evil happen to the just. Okay, well, if it doesn't mean that the just will be exempt to trouble, what does it mean? It means that the trouble that the just, whenever the just are in trouble, God manages the trouble. He manages the experience, if you will, and he will not allow us to undergo, to have to endure, if you will, more than we're able to bear. Write this down, if you will, that God always, write this down, beloved, it's important, for the just, this is true for the just, that God always manages the degree of trouble, He manages the duration of the trouble, and he manages the depth of the trouble. Teach, Pastor. Say it again, bro, Pastor, so I got it right. Yeah, God manages for the just. That's for the just and the just only. God manages the degree of trouble. He will manage the duration of the trouble, and he will manage the depth of the trouble. What a mighty God we serve. Therefore, no grave situation, no emergency situation will ever overwhelm or overtake the just. Yeah, God's not going to let that happen, because if you're just, if you're godly, if you're righteous, if you are wise, God will not allow trouble to overtake you by overwhelming you. God will manage the degree, the duration, and the depth of the trouble the just find themselves in. However, it's different for the wicked. Teach, Pastor. And I'm doing the best I can. Listen. It's not true. That doesn't hold true for the wicked. The wicked shall be filled with evil. In other words, Solomon is saying they will receive the results of their wickedness based upon sowing and reaping. Because they gave out wickedness, they're going to be in turn filled up with wickedness, because again, you reap what you sow. And another thing, God is not going to manage the degree. He's not going to manage the duration. He's not going to manage the depth like he does the just. He's going to let you get full of what you are filled with. So in other words, if my desire is to be wicked, guess what I'm going to get in return? Wickedness. If it's my ministry to do other people harm, to hurt other people, to perform wicked and evil deeds, guess what? That's what's going to return to me, and I will reap more than I sow. So verses 20 and 21 are profound words. Profound words. So we started out talking about perverted words. We talked about piercing words. We've looked at permanent words in verse 19, and profound words in verses 20 through 21. So watch what Solomon does here, beloved. Watch what he does. Solomon transitions from talking about wordy men or women, and he's now going to talk about willing men, willful men, if you will, willing men. He's getting ready to transition from talking about, you do know that we're in the section that that deals with miscellaneous issues, and miscellaneous literally means a mixture, a variety. He's going to talk about various issues. So here's an example of him talking about various issues, because in verses 17 through 21, he talks about wordy men. Now he wants to transition from talking about wordy men to talk about willing men. Look at verse 22, if you will. Look at verse number 22. Verse number 22. In verse 22, the Bible says, lying lips Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. Here it is again. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. His delight. What is Solomon talking about here? Solomon is talking about in verse 23, he's talking about the prudent man, the prudent man. A prudent person is a wise person. A prudent person is a righteous person. A prudent person is a godly person. So the godly person, the righteous person, the wise person, concealeth knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. But we're in verse 22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. That's a simple one to understand. That's a simple one to understand. Again, we have contrast and comparison. In verse 22, lying lips and those who value the truth. That's a simple one to understand. All Solomon is saying, God detests lying and liars, but his delight is in those who value the truth. That's simple. Yeah, if you're lying, if you're a liar, God detests that. He detests that kind of behavior. But he defines delight in those who value the truth. That's verse 22. That's verse 22. But I want to deal with this word abomination. That's a strong word in the Bible. Matter of fact, it's the strongest word God has for sin in all of the Bible. When a thing is an abomination, it's loathsome to God, it's detestable to God, it's disgusting to God, if you will. It's a horrible thing in the eyesight of God. It's a terrible thing in the eyesight of God. You can't get any worse than an abomination, because whenever God chooses to use the word abomination, that's the strongest word he has in all of the Bible for sin. So you never want to get in the category with God where he has to look upon what you do and what you say as an abomination, because the Bible is clear. Lying lips are an abomination to God. It's an abomination in the eyesight of God, but they that deal truly are his delight. So for verse 22, just make clear that God, here it is, that God detests lying and liars, but he finds great delight in those who value the truth. Those that value the truth. That's verse number 22. Verse number 22. But in verse 23, a prudent man concealeth knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. Proclaimeth foolishness. Watch this. Now Solomon transitions from talking about the wordy man to now talk about the willful or the willing man. The willing man. The willing man. Because the prudent man, the willing man, concealeth knowledge. Concealeth knowledge. Concealeth knowledge. But the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. Now watch this. In verse 23, willing man, willful man, he says that the person who concealeth a matter is wiser than a person that exposes a matter. What Solomon is literally saying here is you and I cannot afford to tell everybody everything we know. Did you hear what I just said? We can ill afford to tell everybody everything we know. It's unwise to tell everybody everything that you know. Why is it unwise? Because what you know may be harmful, may be hurtful to other people, And God is not in the business of backing anyone that has a desire to hurt other people. No, God's not in that business. He's in the opposite business of building people up, not tearing people down. If you have information, if you're privy to information, beloved, that will do somebody else hurt or harm, the wise person will keep that kind of information to themselves. Why? Because it doesn't build up. It tears people down. It hurts people. It does harm to people. So if you want to be godly in the eyesight of God, even if you do know something on somebody else that may be hurtful or harmful to their reputation, hurtful or harmful to their influence, and you go blabbering it all over town, God says that's unwise. That's unwise. God says that's ungodly. That's unrighteous. We can ill afford to tell everybody everything we know, especially if it'll do hurt and harm to somebody else. But the heart of a fool will tell everything they know. It does not matter whether it'll hurt somebody else. It doesn't even matter that what they have on another person will do them great harm. It doesn't matter. And that's a fool. That's a person who traffics foolishness in the eyesight of God, because God is not in the business of hurting people. He's in the business of building people up. So Solomon says, stay away from the person who tells everything that they know to everybody they know. Everybody they know. That's unwise. That's unwise. That's verse 23. But look at verse 24. The hand of the diligent shall bear, but the slothful shall be under tribute, meaning they will have to undergo forced labor. They would have to labor for the diligent. Here we're talking about the willing man, the willful man. We just read in your hearing verse 24. The hand of the diligent will rule, but, Solomon's favorite word, the lazy man will be put to forced labor. That's what that text is saying. Why? Because the lazy man, watch this now, the lazy man, the unwillful man, the unwilling man is unfit to rule. Why? He can't rule others because he can't rule himself. That's easy. Yeah, he can't rule over somebody else because he's already proven by being lazy that he cannot manage and rule himself. Because being diligent determines success. It determines advancement. So the diligent will rise to the top. Here it is. The diligent will rise to the top, but the lazy person will always sink to the bottom. Why? Because a lazy person, a person who has no get up and go, if you will, is contrasted with the diligent person who's willing to put in the hard work and be careful in their work. That's what diligent means, to do the hard work and do it carefully, paying attention to details. So what is Solomon saying here in verse 24? What he's literally saying is, I'm trying to finish chapter 12 here tonight. What he's saying is that the diligent will rise to the top, but the lazy person The unwilling person will always sink to the bottom. Sink to the bottom. Look at verse 25. Verse 25. Heaviness in the heart of a man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. I like this verse. Verse 25. Heaviness in the heart. What the Bible calls heaviness in the heart is really the emotional. What should I say? It's depression. It's describing depression. What we clinically call depression is heaviness in the heart in the Bible. So the person who is depressed will cause the spirit of a man to stoop, but a good word will make it glad. What is Solomon saying? Solomon is saying here that the inward cause of depression, listen at this, the inward cause of depression, according to the Bible, to be depressed means to literally to push down or to press down, to pull down, if you will, in order to make something move. To make something move. It means to press down, push down, pull down in order for something to move, to move. That's why God tells us in Philippians 4 and 6, he tells us to be anxious for nothing. Don't allow yourself to become depressed over anything. But when you find yourself anxious, when you find yourself depressed, that's the signal, that's the sign for you to pray. When you find yourself worried about a multiplicity of things, beloved, that's the time to pray. And if you're going to worry, why pray? And if you're going to pray, why worry? Because worry only produces more worries, but prayer will produce the answer to your depression, the answer to your anxiety. So Solomon is saying that whatever causes you to be anxious, whatever causes you to be depressed, he says the cure for depression, the cure for a heavy heart is a good word, is an encouraging word. It's simply a good word, a kind word, an encouraging word. A good word, a kind word, an encouraging word is able to make the sad heart glad. It's able, that's what the Bible says, that a good word, a kind word to somebody, an encouraging word to somebody will cure a heavy heart. So we ought to look for opportunities that when we see people suffering with a heavy heart, think of a good word. Think of a kind word. Think of an encouraging word, because kind words, encouraging words, good words lift the spirit, while the opposite depresses the spirit. So Solomon is saying that we ought to look out for opportunities to say a kind word, a good word, an encouraging word to those who are displaying a heavy heart. That person is a worthy man. A worthy man. That's what a worthy man will do. A worthy man will when they see somebody depressed, when they see somebody anxious about something, they will come alongside and say and promote good words, kind words, encouraging words. That's the worthy man. That's the worthy man. But look at verse 26, the righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduceth them. The righteous is more excellent, is better off than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduceth them. This is Solomon's way, beloved, real quick. This is Solomon's way of telling us we have to be careful. We have to be very careful how we choose our friends. That's what Solomon's really talking about. He's telling us that we, as the people of God, have to be careful how we choose people to be our friends. You know the old adage, you show me your friends and I'll show you your future, because birds of a feather have a tendency to flock together. If your friends are good people, they're people of integrity, they value truth, they value that which is good, that which is excellent, then chances are that's what you will value. That's what you will value. However, if you hang around people who make it a ministry to do wrong, make it a ministry to take advantage of other people, chances are you better be careful, because you'll become the same way. So Solomon says, be careful, be very careful how you choose your friends, because friends have a significant influence. Friends can have a significant impact on the way we think, on the way we feel, and stuff that we will be willing to do. Friends have a significant impact, a significant influence over us in terms of the decisions we make. And so he's talking about here the power of friendship. Friendships can either make you weak or they can make you strong. Friendships can work for you, or your friendships can work against you. That's what Solomon is trying to say. Be careful who you choose as your friends, because friendships, the power of friendship, will either work for you or it's able to work against you. Verse 27. Again, the worthy man. We see the worthy man in verse 27. The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. Let me read it again. The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. Here, Solomon is really using what I call Hebraic humor. He's really telling us a joke in this particular verse. And if we understood Hebrew like Solomon did, then we would be laughing right now, because we know he's telling us the truth through a joke. Humor is a fascinating way to tell the truth. It's a fascinating way to tell the truth. So Solomon here is using humor to tell the truth, to tell a truth, if you will. In verse 27, he's painting a picture of a man who took the trouble to go hunting. He went hunting, he captures his prey, and too lazy to cook it. So therefore, he's going to go hungry because he's too lazy. He's too lazy to fix his own meal. And in a real sense, a lazy person in the Bible is a person that never follows through. You are considered lazy in the eyesight of God if you don't follow through with what you started. If you stop in the midst of what you start, it's because of laziness. God looks upon you as being lazy. When you refuse to follow through on a project, follow through on a personal policy, if you will, you are lazy in the eyesight of God. A person who is lazy will never enjoy life, because they never get the full of life, the fullness of life, because they always stop short of following through with what needs to be done, So here Solomon is using humor to teach us the principle of being diligent. Hard work is that you must be willing not only to start, but you must have the willingness to finish what you start. So here he uses humor to teach us diligence, because the diligent will possess precious things. They will possess many things. Why? Because it takes diligence to advance. It takes diligence to accomplish great things, So you have to be willing to follow through as the diligent person. Last verse and we're finished with chapter 12, and that is the worshiping man. The worshiping man. Solomon closes chapter 12 with the worshiping man. Look at verse 28, if you will. In the way of righteousness is life, and in the pathway thereof there is no death. There is no death. Let me close by saying this real quick. It is a common belief that the way of righteousness, the way of wisdom, the way of godliness is boring. It's a boring life. But being unrighteous and being ungodly, being unwise is exciting. Well, that's the trick of the enemy. That's the trick of the enemy. That's the trick that Satan tries to sell us. It's the trick that society tries to sell us, and it's the trick that sin tries to sell us, that living godly is boring. You can never enjoy life. You can never have fun in life. It's just a boring life. Well, that is not true. That's the biggest lie that's ever been told, because in a real sense, you are not living unless you are living your life righteously, because unrighteousness leads to death, And whenever the Bible uses the word death, it's never talking about annihilation. It's always talking about separation. Separation. When you live an unrighteous life, you will be separated from your God. Separated from your God. Is that not what Isaiah said in chapter 59, around verse number 1? It says, God's hand is not short that he can't save us. His ears are not deaf that he can't hear us. But he says it's our iniquities, it's our sins that separate us from God. If you want to, whenever you are separated from God, you're not living, you're dying. If you're living it up, living on the wild side of life, but everything that you do is unrighteous, you're not living, you're dying. Because death in a real sense means separation. Spiritual death means separation from God. Physical death means separation, the soul from the body. So death is really not annihilation, it's separation. Beloved, listen to me carefully. The worshiping man never wants to do anything that will separate them from their God. To separate them from their God. That's what Solomon is trying to share with us. We have now completed chapter 12. So next week, if the Lord says the same, we'll be looking at chapter 13. I hope you've enjoyed the study tonight, and I pray that the words that have been spoken in your hearing will be beneficial to you in the coming days. God bless you. You've been a wonderful audience. I apologize for going over, but I wanted to finish chapter 12 tonight so we can start fresh.